My parents abandoned me at 18, and 7 years later they crawled back. But I made them regret it. I, 25F, have never shared this publicly before, but reading other people's stories here made me realize that sometimes you need to let it out, if only to finally stop wondering if you were in the wrong. When I turned 18, my parents decided they were done parenting me. No warning. No gentle transition. Just a cold conversation over dinner where my dad looked me in the eye and said, "You're an adult now, and we think it's time you take care of yourself." I didn't even have a job lined up. I was still in high school. My graduation was just a month away, and I hadn't applied for colleges because they'd promised they'd help me figure it out over the summer. Instead, they handed me an envelope with a couple $100 and the deed to my 15-year-old rust bucket of a car and told me I had until the end of the week to pack up and go. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes as I sobbed. She just kept folding towels at the kitchen counter, like she was determined to pretend this was normal. Like it was perfectly fine to eject your only child into the world with no support system, no plan, and no clue how to survive. That week is a blur. I remember crying until I couldn't see straight, driving around aimlessly in my car because I had nowhere to park it overnight that wouldn't get me towed. I crashed with my best friend, Hannah, for a few days, then slept in my car for almost a month after her parents gently told me I couldn't stay forever. At the time, I felt like the world had ended. I would sit in the driver's seat at 3 a.m. and ask myself what I did wrong to make them hate me. I racked my brain for every teenage argument, every slammed door, every C I brought home on a report card. None of it seemed big enough to justify this. Eventually, I got a job as a cashier in a 24-hour grocery store. I started on the night shift because nobody else wanted it, and the manager didn't ask a lot of questions. The pay was garbage, but at least I could afford a weekly motel. By the time graduation rolled around, I hadn't slept in 2 days. I showed up anyway in my wrinkled cap and gown and accepted my diploma with hollow eyes and trembling hands. My parents didn't come. There was no proud family in the stands, no flowers waiting for me at the curb. Just me, my crumpled work uniform stuffed into my purse, and the knowledge that I had to clock in that night at 11 p.m. or I'd be fired. I'll never forget standing in the parking lot afterward, watching my classmates hug their moms and dads. I remember thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe I really am disposable. But here's the thing, rock bottom teaches you who you are. I didn't die. I didn't give up. Over the next few years, I worked every shift I could get. Grocery store, then fast food, then finally an administrative assistant gig at a construction company. I learned how to budget down to the penny. I learned how to negotiate a lease, how to do my taxes, how to keep my old car running with duct tape and desperation. By 21, I'd saved enough for a tiny studio apartment. By 23, I'd taught myself basic bookkeeping and started freelancing on the side. At 24, I landed a remote job with a tech startup that paid more than I ever imagined possible back when I was sleeping in my car. Last month, I turned 25. I have a stable income, a reliable car, and a little condo with big windows that make me feel safe and proud. My life isn't glamorous, but it's mine, and I built it without a single cent from my parents. Which is why I almost dropped my phone when I saw the voicemail from my mom last week. She sounded so casual. Like nothing had happened. Like we'd spoken just yesterday, instead of 7 years ago when she locked the door behind me and never called again. "Hi sweetheart," she said, her voice warm and sugary. "It's been a long time. Your father and I have been thinking about you. We miss you so much. Give us a call when you get a chance." I played that message 5 times in a row, trying to wrap my head around it. Part of me thought maybe, just maybe, they finally realized what they'd done. Maybe they were sorry. But then she sent a text, and everything clicked. "Hope you're well, honey. We were wondering if you could help us out financially for a little while. Your dad's hours were cut, and it's been hard to keep up with the mortgage." 7 years of silence. 7 years of pretending I didn't exist. And now that they needed money, suddenly I was sweetheart again. I'm not going to lie, my hands shook when I read that text. I stared at it for a long time, thinking about the nights I cried myself to sleep in a freezing car. The way my mom couldn't even look at me when she told me to leave. I haven't replied yet. Part of me wants to just block their numbers and never look back. Another part wants to tell them exactly what I think. But the one thing I know for sure? I don't owe them anything. I didn't reply to my mother's message right away. I set my phone on the kitchen counter and just stood there in my tiny condo, feeling like I'd fallen into some alternate universe. For years, I'd rehearsed this moment in my head. What I'd say if they ever tried to come back into my life. How I'd finally get the chance to ask them why. Why they couldn't love me enough to stick around. Why they could toss me aside like trash and sleep at night. But when it actually happened, I just felt tired. I didn't tell anyone about the message for a couple days. I kept going to work, answering emails, taking Zoom calls, smiling politely at the neighbors. But every time I saw my phone light up, my stomach would twist. On the third day, I cracked. I called Hannah. She picked up on the first ring. Even after all these years, she's the one person who never gave up on me. She was the only person who hugged me at graduation, the only one who snuck me granola bars when I was living in my car. "Hey," she said, voice gentle like she already knew something was wrong. "What's up?" "They called," I blurted out, before I could chicken out. "My parents. They want money." There was a pause. Then she let out a long breath, the kind you only hear when someone is trying not to scream. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." "After everything? They think they can just show up and ask you for money?" I felt my throat tighten. "I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do," she said firmly. "You don't owe them anything. You survived without them. You built this life without them. And they sure as hell didn't care if you starved." "I know," I whispered. "Then why are you even considering helping them?" That was the question, wasn't it? I didn't want to admit it, but part of me was still that scared, abandoned teenager who just wanted her parents to love her. Some pathetic, hidden piece of me still hoped they'd apologize. That they'd say they were proud of me. But of course, that wasn't why they called. They called because they were desperate. Because I was useful again. After I hung up with Hannah, I scrolled through the text one more time. "Hope you're well, honey. We were wondering if you could help us out financially for a little while. Your dad's hours were cut, and it's been hard to keep up with the mortgage." No, sorry. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a polite request for a handout. I decided I couldn't respond right away. I needed time to sort through the mess in my head. So I silenced my phone, closed my laptop, and went for a walk. There's this trail near my condo that winds through a little wooded park. I've walked it so many times over the years. When I was first getting on my feet, I'd go there to clear my mind after long shifts. When I finally landed my remote job, I'd celebrate by treating myself to an iced coffee and a stroll. That trail has seen me cry, rage, and heal. As I walked, I thought about all the nights I went hungry so I could keep my motel room. About the years I spent terrified I'd never be okay again. And then I thought about how far I'd come. I wasn't the same girl they abandoned. I had a life. Stability. Self-respect. And the more I replayed that message in my mind, the angrier I got. They didn't get to act like none of it happened. They didn't get to pretend they were loving parents who just fell on hard times. By the time I made it home, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to block them. I wasn't going to cuss them out, either. I wanted them to hear exactly how it felt to be discarded. So I sat down on my couch, took a deep breath, and typed out a response. "Hi Mom. I got your message. I hope you and Dad are well. I'm not in a position to help you financially. I'm sure you remember that you asked me to leave when I turned 18, with no support or safety net. I built my life without any assistance, and I have no intention of funding yours now. I hope you understand." I read it over 5 times before I hit send. My hands were shaking. When it went through, I felt something loosen in my chest. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even realize was still there. For the first time in years, I felt free. It didn't take long for her to reply. "You're being very ungrateful," she wrote. "After everything we did for you. We raised you, fed you, and gave you a home for 18 years. You wouldn't be here if not for us. The least you can do is help your family." I didn't respond. There was nothing else to say. But the texts kept coming. Guilt trips, manipulations, veiled threats about how family should stick together. And when I still didn't reply, my father finally called. He left a voicemail, his voice stern and cold, exactly like I remembered. "You think you're better than us now? You're not. You're still our daughter. You owe us." I didn't listen to the rest. I just deleted it. That night, I sat in bed and realized something important. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt relieved. I was finally ready to let them go. After I ignored the last voicemail, the messages slowed down. For the first time in a week, my phone was quiet. I kept expecting them to escalate, to show up at my door or send letters to my office, but the silence was almost worse. It gave me time to replay everything over and over in my head. When I was a teenager, I always believed that no matter how strict or cold my parents were, they were still my family. That at the end of the day, if I really needed them, they'd be there. But now, all those illusions were gone. They had made their choice 7 years ago. And now, I was making mine. I tried to distract myself by focusing on work. My team was preparing to launch a new product, and my inbox was exploding every morning. I threw myself into it, staying up late to proof proposals and brainstorm marketing copy. It was easier to think about deadlines and customer personas than to sit with the ache in my chest. One evening, Hannah came over with takeout and insisted I stop pretending I was okay. She found me curled up on the couch, laptop balanced on my knees. "Have you eaten?" she asked, eyeing the empty coffee mug on the table. "I had a protein bar," I lied. She set down the bag of food and crossed her arms. "You're not going to starve yourself over them." I sighed, feeling the fight drain out of me. I can't stop thinking about it. About all the times I convinced myself I was imagining how bad it was. That maybe I was just a difficult kid. And now they want to act like none of it happened. Hannah sat beside me and handed me a container of noodles. "You were never the problem. They were. And you don't have to justify your success or your boundaries to anyone." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I know. I think part of me always hoped they'd come back because they loved me. Not because they wanted something. "They're not capable of that," she said gently. "And that's not your fault." We ate in silence for a while. Just having her there made it feel less suffocating. After she left, I made a decision. I was going to write it all down. Not for them. Not to send. Just for me. So I opened a blank document and started typing everything I remembered. The night they told me to leave. The months I spent living out of my car. The slow, painful climb back to something like stability. The moments of pride when I realized I could survive without them. It all poured out of me, thousands of words at a time. By the time the sun came up, I felt hollow but also, lighter. Like dragging the memories into the light had finally robbed them of their power over me. The next day, I got another text. This time from my aunt, my dad's sister, who I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey kiddo. Your mom told me you're refusing to help them. She says you're doing really well now. I understand you're angry, but family is family. Don't let old grudges ruin your relationship. They're your parents. You only get one set." I stared at the message, my heart thumping. It felt surreal that they were rallying reinforcements, like this was some kind of intervention. Family is family. How many times had I heard that line? Usually right after they did something that hurt me. It was always the excuse. The reason I was supposed to swallow my pain and pretend everything was fine. Not this time. I took a deep breath and typed back, "Hi Aunt Carol. I appreciate you reaching out, but I don't have a relationship with them anymore. That was their choice. I'm not interested in discussing it further." A minute later, the little dots appeared as she typed. "I'm disappointed in you. You've become selfish and ungrateful. Your parents raised you. They don't deserve this." I didn't reply. I turned my phone off and left it on the counter. I went out for coffee, and as I sat by the window sipping my latte, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done explaining myself. Done defending my boundaries. Done carrying the shame they tried to pin on me. I was free, and I wasn't going to let them yank me back into that toxic orbit. A week passed without any new messages. Just when I started to think maybe they'd finally accepted it, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from my father. The envelope was thin, the handwriting unmistakable. My stomach flipped as I carried it inside, but this time, I didn't feel afraid. I sat down at my kitchen table and opened it carefully. The letter was short and to the point. "You've made it very clear you think you don't need us anymore. That's fine. But don't come crawling back when you realize you do. You'll always be our daughter, whether you like it or not." There it was again. That smug certainty that no matter what they'd done, they still owned some part of me. I folded the letter and set it aside. I knew right then that this was never going to stop, not unless I made it stop. And I was ready. The letter sat on my kitchen table for a week. Every morning, I'd glance at it while I made coffee, debating whether to toss it, burn it, or lock it in a drawer. But something in me needed the reminder, proof that their manipulation wasn't in my head. I started sleeping better once I accepted that no response was ever going to be enough for them. No amount of money, no apology, no explanation, they'd always find a way to twist it back on me. I knew it was time to think about protecting myself in more permanent ways. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a lawyer. The woman on the other end of the line was calm and kind, which helped soothe my nerves. She explained that in my state, parents can sometimes try to file claims for support if they can prove they're indigent and the child has means. It's rare, but it happens, especially if the parents are vindictive. Just hearing that possibility made my skin crawl. I had fought tooth and nail for every scrap of stability I had. The idea they could legally demand a piece of it made me feel sick. The lawyer advised me to document everything, the texts, voicemails, letters. She said if they escalated, I could pursue a protective order or a cease and desist. I thanked her and hung up, feeling strangely empowered. It was almost funny. They'd spent my entire childhood telling me I'd never be able to take care of myself without them. And here I was, setting boundaries they couldn't control. That weekend, Hannah and I drove out to a little coastal town for a change of scenery. She booked us an Airbnb near the ocean, and for 2 days we ate fresh seafood and drank wine on the balcony. On our last night, we watched the sun set over the water. She turned to me and said, "You know you're allowed to be happy, right?" I looked at her, startled. "You don't have to keep punishing yourself for surviving," she said. "They want you to feel guilty because it makes you easier to control. You don't owe them your peace." It hit me in that moment how much I'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop. Even now, after 7 years of distance, I still felt like I needed their permission to be okay. But I didn't. When I got home, I finally threw the letter away. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my mom this time. "Hi. I don't know why you're doing this," she said, her voice cracking. "You're hurting us so much. We're your parents. We need you. How can you just turn your back on your family?" I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I didn't reply. I didn't feel the need to defend myself anymore. I went about my week as usual. Work, errands, gym, dinner with friends. And every day that passed without me picking up the phone, I felt a little stronger. Then came the next escalation. Hannah texted me a screenshot one afternoon. My parents had messaged her on Facebook. "We've been trying to reach my name. She's not answering. Could you please tell her to call us? We're very worried." Worried. As if this was all about concern instead of entitlement. Hannah didn't reply to them either. She forwarded the message to me and wrote, "I've got your back. Let me know if you want me to block them." I felt a surge of gratitude that almost brought me to tears. That evening, I sat down and wrote a long email to my parents. I wasn't sending it to ask for reconciliation, I was sending it to be clear, once and for all. I told them I did not consent to any further contact. That if they persisted, I would consider it harassment and take legal action. I explained I had documented everything, and I did not wish to have a relationship. Before I hit send, I read it over carefully. No anger. No accusations. Just the truth, plainly stated. Then I clicked send, closed my laptop, and went for a walk. When I came back, there were no new emails. No calls. No messages. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But part of me knew it wouldn't be the end. These were the same people who left me homeless without blinking. They weren't going to let go of the idea that I owed them something. And sure enough, 2 days later, the phone rang again. It was my father. I didn't answer. But this time, he left a voicemail I'll never forget. "You can ignore us all you want," he said coldly. "But life has a way of humbling ungrateful children. You'll see." That was the moment I realized, this wasn't about family or love. It was about control. And I was done letting them have any power over me. After that voicemail, something inside me clicked. I finally saw them clearly, not as my parents, but as people who believed they were entitled to me. To my time, my energy, my money, and my guilt. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. That same day, I called the lawyer again. I told her about the messages to Hannah, the voicemails, the threats. She listened patiently, then walked me through the process of drafting a formal cease and desist letter. I was nervous. Part of me still felt like I was overreacting. That voice in my head, the one they'd spent my childhood cultivating, whispered that I was being dramatic, cruel, ungrateful. But I ignored it. When the letter was ready, I read it twice. It was clear, professional, and legally airtight. It stated in no uncertain terms that any further attempts to contact me directly or through others would be considered harassment and pursued accordingly. I signed it, scanned it, and emailed it to both of them. Then I printed copies and mailed them certified, so they couldn't pretend they never received them. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Of course, that relief was short-lived. That afternoon, I got a barrage of messages from my aunt, who'd apparently been forwarded my email. "I can't believe you'd do this to your parents. They love you. They made mistakes, but everyone does. You'll regret this someday when they're gone. You think you're better than everyone now that you have some money? You're still their child. Nothing changes that. I'm ashamed of you." I didn't reply. I didn't even feel tempted to. I blocked her number and deleted the messages without reading the rest. That night, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine and let the silence of my condo wash over me. I thought about everything I'd survived. The nights I'd slept in my car. The mornings I'd scrubbed grease off my uniform before my shift at the grocery store. The years I'd spent building something out of nothing. I'd fought for this peace. And I wasn't going to let anyone take it away. A few days passed. No calls. No texts. Then, on Friday evening, I got an email. The subject line made my stomach clench. "Family emergency, please read." It was from my mom. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside, it was a long rambling message about how my dad had been in a minor car accident, no injuries, just some damage to the bumper, and how they were struggling to cover the deductible. She said she hoped I could find it in my heart to help, just this once. She ended with, "We're still your parents. We still love you. Please don't do this to us." I read the email 3 times. It was so transparent, so predictable. The same guilt, the same manipulation. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to my lawyer, along with a copy of the cease and desist I'd sent. She assured me it was a clear violation. That weekend, I took Hannah out to dinner to celebrate finally standing my ground. "I feel like I've been holding my breath for 7 years, I told her over dessert. Like I was just waiting for them to swoop back in and prove I was still powerless. "And now?" she asked. "Now, I don't feel powerless anymore." She raised her glass. "To freedom." We clinked glasses, and for the first time, I actually believed it. On Monday, my lawyer sent a formal notice that any further contact would result in legal action. After that, the emails stopped. The calls stopped. Even my aunt went silent. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was finally over. Then, a week later, I got a notification that someone had tagged me in a Facebook post. I almost didn't look. But when I did, I felt my hands go cold. It was a long, public rant from my mother. She'd posted photos of me as a baby, as a little girl in my school uniform, and even one from my high school graduation, the one they didn't attend. The caption read, "We love our daughter so much. We're heartbroken she's chosen to cut us off. All we ever wanted was to be a family again. If anyone knows how to reach her, please tell her we forgive her and just want to talk." Hundreds of comments poured in. Acquaintances I hadn't seen in years, neighbors, old teachers, distant cousins. Leaving sympathy and outrage. "How could she do this to you? She should be ashamed. Family is everything." And there it was again, the narrative they always controlled. The performance of victimhood. The erasure of everything they'd done to me. I felt my throat tighten, but this time it wasn't fear. It was rage. They were never going to stop trying to make me the villain in their story. But I was done being silent. I stared at that Facebook post for a long time. My childhood photos, plastered across the internet as props in their pity campaign. All the comments from people who had no idea what really happened. My phone started buzzing almost immediately, old classmates messaging me, even an old neighbor I hadn't spoken to since I was 15. Some were sympathetic, confused. Others were blunt, telling me to get over it and go home. Every vibration of my phone felt like a slap. I considered ignoring it. Letting them believe their version of events. But then I thought about the 18-year-old girl sitting in her car at midnight, too ashamed to tell anyone where she was. I wouldn't protect their image anymore. I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and started typing. I wrote a post on my own profile. I didn't hold back. I explained that I hadn't been in contact with my parents for 7 years because they had thrown me out at 18 with no money, no place to stay, and no plan for my future. That I had survived alone. Working minimum wage jobs, sleeping in my car, scraping together rent and groceries one shift at a time. I explained that the only reason they were contacting me now was because they wanted financial help, and when I declined, they turned to guilt and public shaming. I attached screenshots of their texts, their emails, and their voicemails. Of the cease and desist letter my lawyer had sent. I ended with this: I share this not to start drama but to protect myself from lies. I am not ashamed of the life I built or the choices I made to keep myself safe. If you still feel the need to judge me without knowing the full story, please remove yourself from my life. Then I posted it. For a few minutes, I sat there shaking, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then the messages started. Some people apologized for assuming. A few said they were proud of me. Others still tried to guilt me. Told me I should have kept it private, that airing family business online was cruel. But most of the comments were supportive. Friends I hadn't seen in years messaged me to say they'd had no idea. Hannah shared my post with a single sentence: proud of you. I felt like I could finally breathe again. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my mother. I can't believe you'd humiliate us like this. You've destroyed our reputation. You've broken our hearts. I don't know how you sleep at night. I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked both of my parents on every platform: Facebook, Instagram, email. I blocked my aunt, too. I knew they might try to reach out some other way, but at least I wouldn't have to watch them lie about me in real time. Over the next few days, I felt something shifting inside me. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was done. Truly, finally done. A week later, I got a handwritten letter in the mail, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. I almost threw it out unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You'll regret this when we're gone. You'll wish you'd been a better daughter. But by then it will be too late. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise that they'd never stop trying to make me feel guilty for choosing myself. I folded the letter and slid it into the folder with all the others. That evening, Hannah and I sat on my balcony watching the city lights. She looked over at me and said, "You look different." Different how? Like you finally believe it's not your fault. I swallowed hard. It's taken me a long time to get here. And I'm not going back. For the first time in my life, I believed it. In the weeks after I posted my side of the story, the drama slowly died down. People always move on to the next spectacle. Even the most devoted gossip eventually loses interest when there's no fresh fuel for the fire. And for the first time in years, my life was quiet. No texts. No calls. No guilt-laden emails or anonymous letters. I found that the stillness was strange at first, like when you get off a boat and your body keeps swaying even after you're on solid ground. I had spent so long living in a state of constant dread, waiting for the next blow, that I didn't know what to do with peace. It took time to learn how to relax without thinking it meant I was being careless. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about them in days. The realization felt good. I poured my coffee and stood at the window, watching the early commuters inch past. 7 years before, I would have given anything to feel this stable, this safe. And I'd done it without them. After work that evening, I met Hannah at our favorite little Italian place. We ordered pasta and split a bottle of wine, talking about everything except my parents. It felt like reclaiming something. Like finally having a life that wasn't overshadowed by old wounds. When I got home, there was a message waiting on my work email. For a moment, my stomach clenched. But when I opened it, it was from an old high school teacher, Mr. Lawson. He'd seen my Facebook post and wanted to reach out. "I'm sorry I never knew what you were going through back then. You were always such a bright kid, and I wondered why you seemed so tired and withdrawn senior year. I'm glad to see you've built a good life. If you ever want to talk or catch up, I'd love to hear more about what you're doing now." I felt something warm and unexpected: gratitude. I wrote back, telling him briefly about my job and how far I'd come. He replied that he was proud of me. And I realized that meant more than any forced apology from my parents ever could. For the first time, it felt like I could look back on my childhood without flinching. Like I could acknowledge the pain and still appreciate how it shaped me into someone strong. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail, this time with a printed return address from a lawyer. I sat down, bracing myself. Inside was a formal notice. My parents had initiated proceedings to petition for financial support under the state's filial responsibility laws. My hands trembled as I read it. Even after everything, even after publicly disowning me and ignoring the cease and desist, they were going to try to force me to pay. For a few minutes, I just sat there in shock. Then I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. She wasn't surprised. She calmly explained that these petitions rarely succeeded when there was a clear record of abandonment or estrangement. She reassured me that with the documentation I had, the emails, texts, letters, and my own testimony, we had a strong defense. When I hung up, I felt strangely calm. They could try whatever they wanted. It wouldn't change who I was or what I'd built. The next day, I sat down and wrote out my statement. I described everything in detail, how they'd kicked me out, refused all contact for years, and only returned when they thought I had money to give. I included screenshots, dates, copies of letters. As I compiled everything, I felt a quiet, steady strength rising inside me. I wasn't that scared 18-year-old anymore. I was 25, with a life I was proud of and boundaries I was finally strong enough to enforce. When I emailed everything to my lawyer, she replied almost immediately, "This is exactly what we need. You've done everything right." That night, I went for a long walk. I watched the city lights come on, one by one, and thought about how far I'd come. They could keep trying to drag me back into their chaos, but they were never going to own me again. Ever. The weeks that followed felt surreal. I had always wondered what it would be like to see them try to use the law as just another weapon. But when it finally happened, it was almost anticlimactic. My lawyer filed our response quickly. She included everything, copies of the cease and desist letters, the texts and emails proving years of no contact, my statement outlining the abandonment. She told me the odds of their petition succeeding were nearly non-existent. Still, part of me couldn't help feeling rattled. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle, the gall it took for them to spend years pretending I didn't exist, then demand I support them financially. Hannah came over one night with groceries and insisted on cooking dinner. She said she wasn't going to let me sit in the dark, stewing in anxiety. While she chopped vegetables, she looked up and said, "You know they're doing this because they're desperate, right?" "I know," I said quietly. "But it still feels like I'm being punished for surviving." She set down the knife and turned to face me. "You're not being punished. You're being tested. And you're passing with flying colors." I wanted to believe her. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. My lawyer reassured me I didn't even have to appear in person. She would handle everything. Still, the night before, I barely slept. I kept replaying every memory of that last week at home. My dad's flat voice telling me it was time to stand on my own 2 feet, my mom folding laundry like she couldn't hear me crying. I thought about the nights I spent in the back seat of my car, clutching my pillow and wishing I could disappear. I thought about all the times I'd fantasized about them coming back to find me, telling me it was a mistake, that they loved me. That fantasy had finally died the day the petition was filed. And in its place, there was something else, clarity. I knew who they were now. I knew what they were capable of. And I knew that no matter what they said, none of this was my fault. The day of the hearing, I took the day off work. I cleaned my condo, lit a candle, and tried to keep my mind occupied. When my lawyer called that afternoon, her voice was bright. "They've withdrawn the petition," she said. "They realized there was no case. It's over." I closed my eyes and let out a shaky breath. "It's over," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "You did everything right." After I hung up, I sat on the couch in stunned silence. It was really over. No more demands. No more threats. No more guilt. I felt like I'd been holding my breath for 7 years, and finally, I could let it go. That evening, Hannah and I went out to celebrate. We sat on the patio of our favorite bar, drinking cold beer and eating greasy fries. She toasted me with a grin. "To freedom," she said. I clinked my glass against hers. To freedom. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was just saying it to convince myself. I felt it in my bones. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run. The air was cool and clean, and the sunrise painted the sky in pink and gold. As I ran, I thought about everything I'd survived. I thought about the girl I'd been at 18, scared, alone, convinced she was worthless. And I thought about the woman I'd become, steady, self-sufficient, unafraid. When I got home, I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe someday they'd try to reach out again. Maybe they'd try another tactic. But I knew one thing for sure. They could never take my peace from me again. In the weeks after the hearing, something in me settled. I had always thought closure would feel dramatic, a big, cathartic moment where everything suddenly made sense. But instead, it was quiet. It was waking up without a pit in my stomach. It was going an entire day without thinking about them. It was realizing that my life was mine again. I started doing small things to reclaim my space and my identity. I repainted the living room, bought a new set of dishes, replaced the old battered couch I'd dragged from apartment to apartment. For years, I'd kept it as a reminder of where I started, of all the nights I'd curled up on it and wondered if I'd ever be safe. But I didn't need that reminder anymore. I wasn't that girl. One Saturday morning, I drove to a donation center and dropped the couch off. As I pulled away, I felt lighter, like I'd finally shed the last bit of skin that still connected me to that old life. Later that week, I got a message on LinkedIn from someone I hadn't heard from since high school. "Hey, I saw your Facebook post a while back. I just wanted to say it meant a lot to me. My parents were similar, and I always thought it was my fault. Seeing you stand up for yourself made me feel like maybe I can, too." I sat there staring at the screen, my heart thudding. It hadn't occurred to me that sharing my story might help someone else. I wrote back, "Thank you for telling me. It took me a long time to realize it wasn't my fault either. You deserve peace, too." That night, I thought about all the kids who grew up like I did. Always wondering what they did wrong, always feeling like they owed a debt they could never repay. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, purpose. Not because I was glad it had happened to me, but because I could finally see that surviving it wasn't just about escaping. It was about refusing to let it define me. Hannah and I planned a little trip to celebrate, a long weekend by the lake, just the two of us. When we got there, we spent hours sitting on the dock, our feet dangling in the cold water. "You really seem different," she said one night, watching the moon ripple across the surface. "I feel different. Like you finally believe you deserve all this." I swallowed hard. I do. For the first time, I really do. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. I thought about how my parents would probably always see me as ungrateful, selfish, cold. But their opinion no longer mattered. They could tell whatever stories they wanted. The people who mattered knew the truth. I knew the truth. When we got back from the lake, I decided to do something I'd been putting off. I changed my phone number. I'd kept the old one out of some strange sense of obligation, like part of me still wanted to be reachable, just in case. But there was no just in case anymore. So I logged into my account, filled out the forms, and pressed submit. A simple thing. A few clicks. But as soon as it was done, I felt a rush of relief so intense it brought tears to my eyes. No more unknown numbers. No more voicemails from the past. That night, I sat in my living room, my new, peaceful, reclaimed living room, and realized I'd never felt so free. Not just because they couldn't contact me anymore. But because I finally believed I didn't owe them anything. Not my time. Not my money. Not my heart. In the months that followed, I settled into my new normal. My phone was blissfully quiet. My email inbox stayed clean. No more surprise letters, no more messages from people telling me I was a terrible daughter. I hadn't realized how much of my life had been spent in a state of bracing for impact. Waiting for the next guilt trip or ambush. Now, all that energy could finally go into something else, into my work, my friendships, and the small, ordinary joys of being alive. I started volunteering at a local community center on weekends, helping young adults with resume writing and job applications. One Saturday, a girl about 19 sat across from me. She looked tired and weary in the way I remembered feeling at that age, like she was used to being disappointed. She told me in a small voice that her parents had kicked her out when she was 18. That she'd been couch surfing ever since. As she talked, I felt a familiar ache. When she trailed off, embarrassed, I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I've been where you are," I said quietly. "I promise, it won't always feel this hard." Her eyes welled up, and I knew she believed me, because I meant it. After she left with a polished resume and a list of local resources, I sat there for a long time thinking about how far I'd come. I didn't want to pretend that all those years of pain had been worth it. But I could see that they had shaped me into someone I was finally proud to be. A person who could sit across from someone else who was struggling and say, with complete certainty, that it was possible to survive. That evening, I called Hannah to tell her about it. She listened patiently, then said, "I hope you know how proud I am of you." I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything." "Always," she said. Later that night, I lay in bed thinking about the way my story had begun. How small and hopeless I'd felt at 18, driving away from the only home I'd ever known with no idea where I was going to sleep. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to prove I was worthy of love, worthy of help, worthy of something more. And I realized, finally, that I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. I didn't owe my parents forgiveness. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them a chance to rewrite the past. I only owed myself the peace I had fought so hard to find. I drifted to sleep with a quiet sense of certainty in my chest. In the morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by the window as the city came alive. It was just another ordinary day. And that was what made it extraordinary. I was free.